Thanks, Martin. We've invited Claire today. Transform Housing are a relatively new client of LIMA's, but one that we've really built a relationship with over the last 12 months, and definitely the strategic partnership that we were talking about in my initial slides. Claire, would you mind just doing a quick introduction of who Transform Housing are and your role there?
Yeah, so Transform Housing and Support, they provide support and housing to over 2,000 people every year, and that's across Surrey, West Sussex, Berkshire and South West London. There's over 20 sites, a few main offices, and there is currently about 150 staff. I've been working with them since January last year in a consultancy role to deliver the digital strategy that was already in place, which was very much Microsoft first, and to make sure that they get the right partners in place and the right technology.
Excellent. So yeah, I'll just share a few questions with you if I can, just for the benefit of the wider audience. So when we initially engaged with you, obviously you'd worked on this digital strategy, this Microsoft first strategy, but when you were building out that strategy and that digital roadmap, what were the key objectives that you were contemplating about what you required from the next iteration of cloud platform?
Yeah, so let's say when I joined them in January 2020, they had a strategy that had been written and delivered for them and with them, and it was very much about moving to cloud in, say, 2022, public cloud, and it was very much Microsoft first. So it was really, the question was how do we get there? We know what we need, we know what we want the outcome to be, but what's the best route? And all options were up for discussion. But the main challenges, the main drivers for this was resilience above anything. They absolutely needed to have the resilient platform. So Microsoft first approach. They needed to have the integration with the Microsoft Platform 365 because their ambition was to get to document management, intranet through SharePoint, etc. The shift to more agile working and the security to support that. They've got a really dispersed workforce. At that point, there was over 200 staff, and really to improve the employee experience. And that has ended up being sort of autopilot, laptop delivered, opened up, and off you go.
And the decision to move towards that strategy, that was actually made pre-COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You sort of made that decision, and then COVID hit, and you still had to make the leap and jump to that transformation during COVID and all the challenges that would bring.
Yeah, let's say the decision was already made on the strategy. We'd started to do the tender early 2020, and actually the tender was approved. April, so we had the contract as well ready in May. I think we were live. Exchange Online went first in July, and then we fully migrated in October. But in line with that, we also have the SD-WAN project and the entire laptop refresh, which was pretty. Don't suggest doing that through COVID when you're completely remote. And I think it was actually LIMA's first full remote project as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked about risk quite a bit, and throughout the initial engagement with LIMA, we obviously had to highlight risks, and there are always concerns around transitioning to cloud. What were those concerns that you envisaged?
The key risk, and working with different organisations myself, it's always the same risk, really. And that is about the dependency and the compatibility with the existing legacy business systems. Like Martin said, the infrastructure really just has to be there, and it has to happen and deliver availability. But the business systems and the data is absolutely core and critical. So there was concerns. There's some older legacy systems that Transform have that for their finance, asset and housing management. So we really needed to be mindful of that they would be compatible and that they were ready for cloud. And as a result, they've ended up on Windows Virtual Desktop. So compatibility around that, the potential non-support from the incumbent because they were transitioning from private cloud to public cloud, but any transition brings risks. so we wasn't sure what the support would be like. There was also a lack of DR testing and integrity checks on the backups. So we kind of had a bit of an unknown around, you might hear my dog's footsteps there, sorry if you can hear the tapping. So there was a bit of an unknown around the integrity and quality of the data. And I think also it was really about, because Transform had one person in IT, there was no expectation that he would just know what to do and have all the technical experience, and we really had to be mindful about digital literacy across the organisation, but more so for the technical resource on site.
So prior to, obviously, you mentioned you moved over to things like 365 services, Microsoft Azure, Windows Virtual Desktop. Prior to moving to public cloud as such, I know that you were with your incumbent who was providing private cloud solution, IaaS solutions, and you're using technologies like Citrix for your end user compute element. Why did you decide to move away from that type of private cloud model and move into a hyperscaler like Microsoft?
It was rigid, and it seemed to be fixed, and there just didn't seem to be that ability or the scope to have that flexibility to say, right, you know, the landscape for Transform is going to change. They've already had 2 acquisitions since actually delivering this project, and we didn't feel that flexibility would be there in private cloud to be able to easily scale up and down. We really needed that work anywhere vision, and that agile kind of, say, work anywhere, and it just seemed to be the public cloud, and particularly Microsoft Azure for them, was the best option. You know, thin client, Citrix, that's all great and they have their place, but for Transform, that wasn't the right model for them anymore.
So one of the challenges that we typically see when we're talking to people that are looking at cloud transformation is that typically we always look at a platform refresh on premise, because that's what they've done maybe for the last 20 years, that whatever their existence would be, and they compare that to moving to a cloud platform, and ultimately partially the decision makers always sit in finance, and they always want to know what the cost implications are for that. And with typical on-premise solutions, that's really easy. You sort of build out a platform that is designed for growth over the life cycle of that platform, 3 to 5 years, and you've got established costs. Finance, it works perfectly for them because they know exactly what they need to budget for, what they're going to pay over that 3 to 5 year period. And then when they presented with this cloud model, which is largely OpEx based, there's often concern around, these costs are going to sprawl. How do we budget for it? That whole change in financial culture. And how did that work for Transform? I know that you were with a private cloud provider and you already had cloud products, but you definitely expanded that cloud usage. How did that impact from a budgeting and cost perspective?
So I think that with Transform, they're very fortunate. They've got, a really fantastic and forward-thinking board as well. So it was always, the focus was always about what is the outcome, what do we need to deliver, and how can we deliver the best services. This is by far the biggest investment Transform have made and will make in IT and other areas of the business, because their values is really about putting the customers and the clients at the heart of what they do. And to do that, they acknowledged that they needed to make really big shifts. So this wasn't about a money saving exercise. They knew it was going to be a big investment. It's only now we can start to really think about the next steps about what that looks like as getting the best out of cloud. But it's the mindset change, it's the cultural change to budgeting. So they were used to not having the big capital expenditures. So there are other projects that were tied into this as well. But this ultimately was always about what does the goal and what do we want at the end of this.
Brilliant. So one of the other challenges that we get, and this is typically, from IT teams, is that with a on-premise infrastructure or even a private cloud infrastructure, sometimes the IT team take ownership of the management of the actual platform, of the infrastructure itself, not just the applications. It's what they've done for a long time. potentially that's what they signed up for, that's what they enjoy. And then all of a sudden, as you move to a cloud provider or a public cloud provider that takes care of that platform and they take ownership, obviously the uptime of Azure is taken care of by Microsoft engineers, not by Transform's engineers. And we see IT teams getting really concerned. Am I going to lose my job? What is there for me to do? What will my typical day look like? How has that impacted your IT team and how they are helping the business going forward?
So the IT team, as in the one person at Transform plus me to help deliver all of this, the aim was to never replace that tap on the shoulder support that you do need when you've got quite a big workforce. So his role has changed to the point where we can now try to use him more proactively and instead of always just being reactive. So the freedom to go across 20 sites is not easy for one person to do, but offer the drop-ins, the one-to-ones, post 17th of May, that is, sensibly, to do the drop-ins for staff. But there's, frontline staff that just don't get the support because they're waiting at the end of a ticket queue. I think the resources now can really focus on what matters because we're achieving the infrastructure is in the background. It's no longer in the cupboard with the door shut and somebody in there working away. It's actually just there. It's always there. Services being looked after with that wraparound managed service, and we can start to really focus on data, business intelligence, data insights, and business systems. And that's where the resource is really now focusing. But plus upskilling him as well, so that he can embrace and learn all the different ways of working, because it's very different for him having been there sort of 15 years working in one way.
So you mentioned that outside of the cloud transformation project, you had other initiatives that delivered on this digital first strategy. How has the cloud migration and transformation project helped drive those initiatives?
Well, I think I mentioned at the beginning, the strategy initially said for replacing business systems, then look to do public cloud and with a migration around 2022. Well, what we've done now, and it's actually COVID probably accelerated this along with public cloud and with Azure, is they've actually been able to accelerate the whole strategy and what they want to do right now. So right through to 2021. We've got SharePoint document management. We've been able to go live with the SharePoint intranet. They didn't have that before. Obviously, Teams is fantastic for them, and it's how they've been able to deliver all their services. It's brought forward a huge amount of the business projects, and the next one is Teams Link to replace their phone system.
So just a couple more questions, and then we'll open questions up for the rest of the attendees. Obviously, you're privileged enough to have already been through this cloud transformation project. Given hindsight, what's the biggest piece of advice that you give for people that are contemplating this move?
So I think the good thing is having sight of different sort of transitions and projects for multiple different customers in the last sort of 12 months. It's always the same. It's planning and testing, but focusing on Transform. There was a bit of a rush around, contracts with their incumbent had already expired. So we didn't get that time to do the soft market tests and really look at what were the options and to plan it all in and go back to what Martin said about, yes, we know we want to get to, we want to go to public cloud, but why? Why do we want that, and what really can it offer? So planning, involve the right amount of business owners, like we've said, get them involved in the workshops. Don't just assume and make decisions for them, but it does depend on your resource capacity as well. So plan it, don't rush, and absolutely when it comes to testing, to really achieve that fantastic employee experience, make sure you get all different levels around the organisation, digital literacy levels, responsibilities, just get everybody involved and really get everybody to embrace it. Planning and testing, and try not to do it for a pandemic.
Last question then. Looking at the 5 stages that we discussed today, I would argue that Transform's up to stage 4, the pat on the back stage. We've delivered the project, we've migrated services over to cloud. We've talked a little bit about Cloud Optimize and how you drive constant efficiency, constant change once you're into that platform. You're probably at that position now. What value do you see in those type of services?
Oh, a huge amount, because like I say, there's finite resource in, they've only got 1,000, just under 1,000 properties. So there isn't a huge amount of income to justify having lots of IT resource. So that's where we need that partnership and that support and review to advise on the best way forward. And again, we've got to cloud, but we're not necessarily using it at its best. And the next question will be around, as we start to replace some of those legacy systems with SaaS applications, do we need Windows Virtual Desktop? What does that look like? You know, is there going to be another acquisition where they're scaling up and down? And I think the insights from the experts is the next step and what we need.
Thanks, Claire.